If you look out at your garden beds right now and just feel a wave of defeat, I want you to take a breath. It is very likely not your fault. Think back to just a few weeks ago. Everything was perfect. You had crisp, sweet green leaves. The cilantro smelled amazing. Your peas were climbing. And you finally felt like you had this gardening thing completely figured out. And then, almost overnight, the heat hit. Suddenly, your perfect cilantro shot up into white flowers. The peas completely dried up and quit, and that beautiful lettuce turned so bitter it's completely inedible. It feels like a betrayal. You're watering more, you're stressing out, desperately trying to save a garden that seems to be dying right in front of your eyes. But here is the shock you need to hear today. Your garden didn't fail you. It's just doing exactly what it was genetically programmed to do when the calendar flipped. The real problem isn't your green thumb. It's that you're trying to force spring plants to fight a summer they were never built for. So today, we're going to look at the hidden biological switch that just ruined your cool season crops, and the 7 hyper-resilient, heat-loving replacements you need to plant right now. Several of these actually carry a fascinating history of saving human lives during brutal summer droughts, and they are exactly what will turn your desperation back into a massive harvest. Part 1. Why your spring crops are collapsing. Lettuce, spinach, cilantro, peas, and most brassicas like broccoli and cauliflower all share the same problem. They're cool season crops whose genetics come from cooler climates, and once temperatures rise, they shift straight into survival mode. Bolting is what that looks like in lettuce. The center stem shoots upward almost overnight. The plant stretches, and it moves directly into flowering. Heat causes a spike in gibberellin, the plant hormone that pushes a plant out of leaf growth and into seed production. Once that switch flips, the leaves turn bitter and tough. Why? Because feeding you stopped being the priority the exact moment reproducing before dying took over. Spinach follows the exact same script, usually faster. Cilantro can look perfect one afternoon and be flowering by the next morning. Peas just decline fast, the moment real heat sets in. None of this means your gardening is broken. It means these plants are doing precisely what their genetics tell them to do the second summer shows up. But here's the question worth actually sitting with. If these crops were never built for July, why does nearly every planting guide and seed packet hand you the same generic spring to summer timeline no matter where you live? The honest answer isn't a conspiracy, it's scale. Seed companies and planting calendars get built for a national audience, which means they're calibrated to a kind of default climate, and that default falls apart the moment you're dealing with real heat. Nobody's out there customizing seed packet advice to your specific summer, because that kind of customization doesn't scale to a mass market. And the result? Gardeners in hot climates getting handed a timeline built for somewhere else, then blaming themselves when it doesn't hold up. Letting go of that timeline is step 1. Stop trying to force a spring crop to survive a summer it was never designed for. Once that clicks, the next question gets a lot more interesting. What was actually built for this? And the answer here isn't just practical, because some of these crops carry a history most gardening channels never touch, and a couple of them are going to surprise you. But before we get into that list, if you're the kind of person who wants the story behind what you're growing and not just a care sheet, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe now so the next one lands in your feed. Part 2, the crops built for this, and the history behind them. These 7 crops don't just tolerate summer heat. Several of them carry a history of being relied on specifically because they could survive it, long before anyone was writing planting guides at all. Okra traces back to Africa, and it reached the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade, carried and cultivated by enslaved Africans, specifically because it held up under punishing heat that broke many European crop varieties. Southern US and Caribbean cooking built okra into a cornerstone ingredient, and that wasn't a coincidence. It was one of the few crops reliably producing food through the hardest and hottest stretches of the year. In the garden today, okra still behaves exactly the way it always has. Hotter temperatures mean faster growth and heavier production. Harvest the pods regularly, though, because they toughen fast if you let them sit too long on the plant. That history alone earns okra the top spot on this list, well before we get to anything more familiar. Cowpeas, known to most people as black-eyed peas or southern peas, share that same West African origin and the same trade route into the American South. Two things made them valuable back then, and both still hold. They produce food, and they improve the soil at the same time. Being legumes, they pull nitrogen and fix it in their root systems, leaving richer soil behind for whatever gets planted next. Heat, poor soil, dry stretches, cowpeas shrug off all three better than almost anything else in a home garden, which explains exactly why they became a southern staple in the first place. Sweet potatoes come from indigenous America, and they became a backbone crop for subsistence farming across the hot, humid U.S. South precisely because they kept producing through months that wrecked other staples. Out in the garden, the vines spread aggressively once the heat hits, shading the soil and building a kind of living mulch layer while the roots quietly develop underground. Most people file sweet potatoes under a fall harvest and never clock how much the plant itself runs on summer heat to get there. Even a crop this familiar hides a growing pattern most people have completely backwards. Peppers come from the hot regions of Central and South America, so their heat tolerance was never an adaptation, it's just home turf. Peppers sit in nearly every home garden already, so you'd assume there's nothing left to learn here, but wait until you see what happens once real heat arrives. Spring is where peppers do almost nothing, sitting small and seemingly stuck, and then everything changes once the heat lands. Growth speeds up, and both flowering and production jump. One caution worth knowing, extreme heat past the upper 90s can still trigger flower drop, and larger bell peppers can get sun-scalded without enough leaf coverage, so afternoon shade helps protect the fruit, even on a plant that loves the heat. Another option is eggplant, coming out of South and Southeast Asia, domesticated in monsoon heat climates, and it follows the pepper's playbook almost exactly. Cold soil and cool nights make it miserable, which is why spring is a struggle, and then real summer heat flips a switch and growth takes off. If your eggplant looked half dead back in May, it probably wasn't dying, it was just waiting. You can also try Armenian cucumber that carries Middle Eastern and Mediterranean roots, bred across generations specifically for hot, arid conditions. Standard cucumbers tend to buckle under intense summer stress, but Armenian cucumbers keep right on producing through it, mild tasting and reliable for salads straight through the hottest stretch of the year. You might already know this one. Basil traces to the Mediterranean and South Asia and is built to love the sun. It's probably the single most common herb in any garden, but timing changes everything here. Cilantro is bolting and checking out right about now, and that's exactly when basil is just getting warmed up, one of the easiest wins in the whole summer garden, and it pairs naturally with tomatoes, both in the soil and on the plate. Part 3. Making these crops actually succeed. Picking the right crop only gets you halfway there. The other half is giving it the conditions it needs to actually establish. Two things matter more than anything else. Water deep, not often. Shallow daily watering trains roots to hug the surface, which puts them exactly where the summer sun dries things out fastest. Deep watering pulls roots down into cooler, moister soil where that moisture sticks around longer, and deep roots are what actually carry a plant through a heat wave. Mulch matters just as much. A layer of straw, shredded leaves, compost, or wood chips shields soil from extreme temperature swings, cuts down evaporation, and keeps roots cooler, since bare soil under direct summer sun gets hot enough to stress both the roots and the soil biology living in it. Just keep the mulch pulled back a bit from the stems so it doesn't cause rot. Oh, one last thing. Established plants handle heat far better than seedlings do, so getting a plant into the ground before peak heat arrives gives it a real head start. And once it's in the ground, keep an eye out for the early warning signs: leaf curl, midday wilting, flower drop, scorched leaf edges, because catching these early is what makes them easy to fix. So to wrap it up, your garden isn't failing. What's struggling right now was never built for this season, and what thrives in July heat, okra, cowpeas, sweet potatoes, peppers, eggplant, Armenian cucumber, and basil, wasn't picked at random either. Several of these were relied on historically for the exact reason you need them today, because they don't just survive the hardest stretch of summer, they were built for it from the start. Stop asking how to force a spring crop through the heat, and start asking what's actually meant to grow right now. That single shift is what makes the rest of the season easier. So if this changed how you look at what's sitting in your garden right now, don't forget to subscribe, because digging into what actually works, and why nobody explained it this way before, is exactly what this channel does.